So we've got about almost 2 weeks into it now. This is our 12th practice. We just finished upstairs right now. I'm very pleased with the progress, yet I see things that we can obviously constantly get better at. I think just the experience returning and depth returning and newcomers have all started to mesh pretty well. Obviously, we've not set any rotation or lineup or anything like that. We've really had mixed lineups going in different drills. In different groups, we've done some 5-on-5, not a ton, but we were able to. We're starting to see different combinations and who picks up on things well, who still has a ways to go. I think most of the time has been spent on the defensive end. We have started to progress a little bit more offensively, but I just like this group, how they attack every day and they come to play and they compete. It's been extremely competitive. There's been some tussles at times. I think everybody sees that there's a lot of potential here in terms of who could be on the floor, so that they understand that there's going to have to be some scraps for minutes in terms of who's going to be out there. So, like I said, I think the biggest thing is just appreciate how hard they've worked and how they've approached everything. And older guys have done a good job of leading, but yet the younger guys have not taken a back seat at all. They've been extremely competitive. So, with that, I'll open it up to any questions you guys have.
Brandon and Kelly have microphones. If you want to raise your hand, though, we can get started.
Is there any downside to having high expectations?
Well, I think internally there's always been expectations. They just sometimes get talked about more on the outside than what they do on the inside, maybe, or magnified more on the outside. Certain years, I don't think we've ever had a group that doesn't come in with an expectation of trying to win the Big Ten championship. And then when you get to that point, if you can compete well in this league, then you have a chance nationally. So I think this group is unlike any other, that they have high expectations, and nothing that has been said on the outside probably is any more or any higher than what they think their goals are on the inside. So I wouldn't say there's any downside to it. Just some years it gets talked about more externally than what it does in other years.
Coach Ethan Happ had a great freshman season. What is it like this year for him now? Obviously, everyone knows who he is. He'll be targeted, all that kind of stuff. How does he prepare differently, and what are his expectations now moving into his sophomore season?
Well, he's better. He's bigger. He's in better shape. He's stronger. I think he's understands the game better and understands what his strengths and weaknesses are. He's tried to improve his weaknesses. I think his what he was good at last year has gotten even better. He's been very consistent, which I think last year was an area he struggled with. He was really kind of up and down, a lot of times right within a game. So I think that's been one of the focuses for him in the offseason, is obviously improve some physical aspects, skill-wise, and also how he is physically, but also mentally be able to become more consistent. And I definitely see a progression in the right area. There's been days he's been outstanding in practice. So, where I'm excited in terms of what his potential is. I think he's still not where he can be. I think he's gotten better defensively with his feet. His ball handling's gotten better. Shooting is something he's worked on. I wouldn't say he's a prolific three-point shooter, but the confidence to be able to play on the perimeter is much higher than it was a year ago. So in all, I think a very good step in the right direction.
You have guys on your team who aren't afraid to be vocal off the court. Most recently, Nigel Hayes making some national headlines this weekend. Not about that specifically, but just as a coach and as a program, how do you approach talking to players about whether it's protests or things that they post online in advance, if you are having those conversations and making sure that they're representing the school in a good fashion?
Well, I think the number one thing is you have to communicate. You have to talk to your players about that, because there are a lot of the world has changed so much in terms of when maybe I was at that age, social media, events, how everything is, there's instant alertness of what's going on in the world. And obviously these players have done a very good job, specifically Bronson and Nigel, in terms of being very worldly in their view. I think that's the one thing, you hit it directly and you talk about it directly, and making sure in their cases of the Dakota Pipeline and also Black Lives Matter, that we sit down, we talk about, okay, what do you want to do and why, and what's your reasoning behind it, and to hear them talk about it and to hear the depth of their knowledge and understanding, not only of the current issues, but how it got to this point and why it's important to them. I'm just proud of how they've been able to take their college experience and be able to develop into something way more than just basketball, and use their education and their resources and their knowledge level to be able to try to help others. And that's the number one thing we've talked about. Everybody can point to issues or a problem. Very easy to point fingers, make a statement, all those things. What are you going to do to be part of the solution? And in both their cases, in those areas, they've taken steps forward with action and try to help other people and try to make it better for those coming behind them. And that's what you have to applaud and support, that they've been able to put some action behind their words as well.
Is it any different, though, with the NCAA, the way that Nigel was this weekend?
That's an issue that's been on the table and out in the forefront for years. I mean, that's not anything new. We understand what the issues are at play. We understand how things have changed, and I'm very much in favor of how the change has taken place with meals and snacks and cost of attendance and those things. And things are trending in the right direction, but that really isn't a new subject area. It's always been on the forefront of a lot of discussions over the last few years. Well, I think the one thing you have to realize is that everybody has the right to make their statement the way they want. And you accept that, but you understand the logic and the reasoning behind it. And I think that's the one thing that really, for me, it's not a new issue. I mean, every head coaches meeting I've been at, all the committee things that I've been a part of, the NEBC, it's always at the forefront of discussion. And obviously we're moving in the right direction, and we're always trying to make, I talk to these guys a lot about how can we make your experience here better? How can we make the time you have here as rewarding and as enjoyable as possible? And that's obviously a point of conversation, but that's on a much higher level than just us here with this immediate team. I'm talking about more of the things around here that we can, travel, practice time, those type of things, community service time. How can we make it better for them so they can be more efficient and obviously still keep laser focused on what they're really here for, and that's to make sure they trend towards their degree and not get pulled in 1,000 different directions.
Jocko?
Coach, is there anybody that has surprised you over the summer, or some of the newcomers? What can we look for from those guys coming off the bench?
Well, first of all, I don't know who's coming off the bench yet because I don't know who's going to start. But I think I've seen progression. The nice thing about having that many freshmen that played last year, and obviously you roll the dice, because if you don't have some success with it, then maybe you don't look at it as a beneficial experience. But I thought at the time when those guys were getting some experience that if they could take that experience last year and take it into the spring and the summer and this fall and use that as a catapult into this season, they'd had some real life experience to draw back on when they're in the weight room down the hall, or when they're in the practice gym, they're out on the track, or whatever Coach Helen has them doing during the summer, that they now can apply it to, this is why we do the things we do, and this is why this drill is so important. They were able to get a taste of it last year. Sometimes with younger players, there can't be that correlation. They don't connect the dots, and I think this group has done that, and that's the benefit of having those guys get that experience last year. So across the board, I don't know if I can really pinpoint one individual, because they've all physically gotten better, quicker, stronger, improved some skills. And now it's a matter of putting all those individual characteristics together to form the best team possible. So I'm happy with the progression of everybody across the board.
Jeff, over here.
Greg, can you just revisit a little bit how when you guys were really looking hard at Trice, you eventually found Ford and how he became part of the visit,
Right.
came here, and what you like in him as well?
In Ford? Well, we had gone down. We were tracking Dimitri all year, really. And obviously in the situation we were in as a staff with interim, we couldn't move fully like we wanted to until March. So we had tracked him through the year, and obviously had known the family, and recruited Travis, and Dimitri was 6th, 7th grade at the time we were in there watching Travis. So we knew we had a very good relationship with the family. Dad is a high school coach. Dad played at Butler and Purdue, so we knew the chances there of him being a pretty good player were pretty high. And then when I got a chance to see him at IMG in the spring after our season was over, there was no doubt within 10 minutes I could tell instincts and quickness level and just how he talked to people. He had a quarterback mentality. And I like those guys that can, I've always thought if you can handle a huddle of 10, you have no problem with 4 on the floor with you. So, and he was a very good high school quarterback in Ohio and was, I think, a runner-up in their state tournament in football, but had battled some injuries, so really couldn't completely focus on basketball like he had wanted to, and that was the reason behind going to IMG. But then as we were watching Dimitri, I kept looking over at this other court and saw this 6'7" skinny guy that was, man, he's pretty good. And Lamont was with me at the time, and I said, we got to check out who this guy is. And kind of all the coaches that were there during the time kind of migrated towards that court as well. And we've obviously found out who it was and sent Coach Moore back in another week to see them. And he kind of reaffirmed what we had seen the week prior, 2 weeks prior. And then just coincidentally worked that he was able to come on the visit at the same time Dimitri was. So I like his potential. He's very skilled. Good athlete, long, high IQ, picks up things really quick, asks the right questions. So he's going to be a good player here. When? That's obviously it's pretty competitive right now. But in terms of what he's done so far, he makes some things happen, and he's turned some heads a little bit. And like I said, those 2 freshmen, Meach and Aleem, have really not taken a back seat at all. I mean, Meach just made a few plays upstairs today. We were doing some ball screen drills, and they had a hard time containing him in a small space. So it was good to see that those guys compete.
Back there.
Coach, I think a lot of people perceive you to kind of be a down-to-earth guy and all that. But that being said, in your first full season now as head coach, do you feel like anything is different now that you are kind of at the helm?
Well, I think my folder's a lot thicker than maybe what it was a year ago in terms of notes and plans going forward. But I think the biggest thing is the off-season management of time and energy and calendar. I think that's been the biggest thing that's been the change. The basketball all stays the same. I think you understand you're in a decision-making mode now, and that really flipped the switch back in December. That was I thought a pretty easy transition for myself, but it's all the other things of managing the charity events, golf outings, speaking engagements, all those things have been the biggest thing. And not that it was a surprise, but I've always thought it's one thing to look at it on paper or take requests that come into the office, and it's another thing to put it on your calendar, but it's a whole nother level to live it and to live your calendar day to day through those things. So it's been more about managing the time the right way, learning to say no, managing energy. But in terms of the basketball specific, now I have more time to be able to really plan and kind of look microscope and telescope at the same time. Where are we at today and where should we be in a month? And kind of spoon feeding some things we've dove into pretty deeply, other things we've really been nibbling on in terms of as we go through the preseason and trying to throw something new every day at them, and then also going back and trying to polish up the core principles and the habits we really want to ingrain. So it's slowed down a little bit. The world's spinning a little slower than it was back in December and January.
Lance?
Coach Bronson was named to the Cousy Award watch list today. What more do you expect from him in his senior season? Have you talked to him about growing his game in a certain way or area?
Yeah, and he has, because he's physically gotten a lot better. When you guys see him, you'll notice the difference in terms of quickness level, speed with the ball, quickness with the shot. He's become much more consistent. I think that's the biggest thing for him is we knew physically he had to take a step, and he's done that. He's really dedicated himself to diet and conditioning and sleep patterns and all those things that the elite players understand eventually that they have to do. And I think from that standpoint, he's taken a huge step forward. He's been fun to watch so far. I mean, I think the biggest thing for him is he knows how to play. It's just a matter of managing the consistency and then being a leader on the floor. And now that the advantage of being a leader as a junior is that you get to do it again as a senior. So, not having any seniors other than Jordan Smith last year in that position, those 4 juniors got a taste of what typically only happens when you're a senior. So they got a little extra experience at it, which hopefully makes them better for this year.
We have time for about 2 more questions before the student athletes come in. There you go.
You can yell it. Well, in both cases, handling a year where you don't get to play is hard. Even if they were perfectly healthy and chose to redshirt, guys that have gone through that, it's hard because they're so used to playing and playing at a high level and having success. Otherwise, if they weren't very good players, they wouldn't be here. So that's always an adjustment. Obviously, for Brevin, you have to deal with the frustration of an injury not only once but twice, and then the whole rehab and coming back from that. And in Andy's case, obviously you're in a whole new country. You don't know anybody here or very few. He didn't like the food to begin with, so that was an adjustment. And just, he not only had to adjust to that, but, here he is trying to fit into a college team, and then he finds out in a few weeks he's not eligible. So those guys both had a lot thrown at them, and they both handled it very well. I mean, and you obviously have to manage frustration levels, and you understand they're both competitive and want to do well and want to help the team. But I think they both have approached it the right way and have grown from it. They're both better than they were a year ago, and we'll see how both of them fit into the mix.
Phil?
And has the teaching been different the start of this year? So last year with so many young players and coming back and trying to reestablish the Wisconsin identity, is it a little bit different this year with what you have returning?
I'd say it's as much in detail as we've ever been. And I've tried to go back. Actually, not tried. I did go back and pull every practice plan I had since 1993, get them all organized from practice 1 through 30, and then pull the specific drills out based on dribble penetration, shooting drills, transition defense drills, everything, and categorize it. So I had a working library of things that we used in the 90s to the 2000s to the last couple of years. And it was kind of fun to go through and see how drills had changed. Sometimes they were the exact same drill, the exact same name. Sometimes it was a different name, same drill. So just pulling back of what has made us good and what has made us so consistent, and going back to some of those core basics. The game doesn't change. You still have to be solid with the ball, take care of it, understand that you have to maximize as many possessions as possible. You don't get many mulligans at this level in terms of wasting possessions, so we had to get better at taking care of the ball. And then everything defensively, from transition defense to how we guard ball screens to how we chase shooters. I mean, it's been really a by-the-step teaching fall, and we've really broken it down, even for the older guys. They've had some things thrown at them that they haven't had here in 4 years, but have always been part of our core philosophy and foundation. I think it's helped, and I think it's reaffirmed why we do things the way we do, and given some logic to the process. So they've attacked it pretty well. We've kept enough new things to keep them kind of guessing, spiced in with some old reliables that are very important for our progression.